Good morning, Jeepers. Welcome back to Project Felicity, my 2006 Jeep Wrangler that we're putting a Kubota V2403 into. Today I want to go over real quick the gauges that we're going to be using for this project. Okay, sorry for the awkward camera angle and the bright light. This is the only way I know how I can get y'all to see what the factory gauges look like and why I'm replacing them. So we have fuel, volts, tach, speedometer, oil pressure, and coolant temperature. And then you have a whole bunch of warning lights. Now, the main reason to swap these gauges is, number one, this is actually connected to the ECU. I am not going to be running the ECU in this Wrangler anymore. And sure, there's probably is a way where I could still get information to this instrument cluster, but there's still other problems. Most importantly is that tachometer. So let's take a look at that. Now, the 4.0 will rev all the way to 5,000 RPM and redline around 5,500, and I guess you could push it to 6. Honestly, I've never pushed my engine past 4. Now, my diesel engine is going to have a redline closer to 3,000 RPM, and really, I don't want to push it past 2,800. So, if I were to keep this instrument cluster, I wouldn't even be utilizing half of that tachometer. So my resolution of data would be reduced by over 50%. The other problem I have with this instrument cluster is the oil pressure. What is the oil pressure? I have no idea. It's low to high. I don't know, is that 20, is that 40, is that 60, is that 80, is that 140? I have no idea. Now on a factory engine, like the 4.0, this is fine. Jeep knew what they were doing. You don't really need to know the specifics, but when you're doing an engine swap, you really need to have clear information. So now let's go take a look at the gauges I am going to be putting in this TJ Wrangler. Okay guys, here are the gauges we're going to be using. They're from a company called Intellitronix, and we are going to be putting them in this Autometer gauge mounting solution. Now I really like this. It gives you a left, right turn signal, high beams, parking brake. You can wire up your transfer case so you know when your transfer case is engaged, and a check engine light. This is one of the reasons why this check engine light, I went with these Intellitronix gauges. So let's look at the gauges real quick. So this is how I got them, and this is one of the first things I want to point out. Made in America. I really like these gauges. They're a great company. They have a lifetime warranty and guarantee. If you have any problems with these gauges, you just send them an email or call their support line and they will get you straightened out. I cannot say enough good things about Intellitronix. Now the other reason why we went with digital gauges is because of the resolution. Now I really wanted a lot of data when I was going to run this Kubota engine. And the reason I say data is diesel engines are a low RPM engine. So if I were to use the tachometer that came with my Jeep Wrangler, I would only be going up to about 2,800 RPM. That tach goes to 5,000 RPM before it even redlines, and then it goes to 6,000 RPM. So it would be very difficult to see in that small little span what RPM that engine was at. That is part of the reason why I went with digital gauges. Now, as I show you each gauge, I will go into depth why I went with these gauges. But this is what I got from Intellitronix. These are some of the instructions. Very clear. They're in color. They're well labeled. They have diagrams. They tell you what goes to what, the color of the wire, everything. These are fantastic instructions. Again, great quality. American made, you cannot beat it. So, this bag is all the sending units and adapters. So, we're not really going to go over that. We don't need to right now. These three gauges are actually separate. These are not going to be mounted in the instrument cluster. We will go over those later in this video. Now, these gauges are the ones we're going to go over. So this is fuel, speedometer, tachometer, and I'm actually going to put these how I actually want them. So fuel's going to go there. This is volts. This is oil pressure, which means this last one, which is not labeled, is going to be coolant. Now this is how the factory Jeep Wrangler is set up. Fuel, volts, oil pressure, coolant, tachometer, speedometer. That is how I'm going to mount these gauges in here. I want it to replicate what I'm already used to seeing. I'm used to seeing fuel here, I'm used to seeing volts here, I'm used to looking at the oil pressure here, and I'm used to looking at the coolant here. Speedometers here, tachometer here. By going with what you already know, you really don't have to retrain your mind when you're looking for information on how your vehicle is running. To me, that's very important. So, let's move all this other stuff away. We'll look at the tachometer first. We'll move the speedometer, volts, fuel, oil, and coolant out of the way. I made this nice little piece of wood. The reason for this is so I can stick the gauge in it, and then we have this power brick. All this does is supplying me 12 volts from a AC line. I actually stole this off my 3D printer. This way I can turn on the gauges and show you why I like them. So let me unpack this tachometer gauge and we'll get started. Okay, I've got the gauge in the wood block, so let's turn it on. Okay, so I'm going to set it so it shows all gauges, and we are going to set this to 4-cylinder for now. Now this is very easy to do, and what it's going through is its config cycle. Right now it's stuck in this because it doesn't detect a RPM signal on this signal wire. Now again, I absolutely love these gauges, and this gauge is one of the reasons why I went with digital gauges. A diesel engine is a low RPM engine compared to a gasoline motor. Our 4.0 engines and even the 2.5 liter and the 2.4 liters in the later TJ Wranglers, they could all spin to about 5,000 RPM. My diesel engine isn't really going to want to spin past 2,800 RPM. I've heard you can spin them to 3,000, 3,100 RPM, but there just really isn't a point in doing that. And what I like about this is it's set on 3,000 because that is now what the max RPM limit is on this graph that you can kind of see around here. So when I glance down, not only am I going to see a very bright display of what my engine RPM is, it's also going to have this moving LED bar graph that wraps around too. So not only can I look down and see the exact RPM, as I'm driving I can just glance and see, oh, if it's about here, I'm at, 1,500 RPM. If it's here, I'll be at about, 2,000. Here, I'll be close to 2,500. So I can very easily tell, is the engine idling? Am I at low RPM? Am I getting really close to the red line? It just gives you really, really nice visibility. And they're very configurable as well. So the other thing I do like is this purple wire. What this does is when you apply voltage to it and you would hook this up to like your headlight switch, it dims the entire display. So when you're driving at night and you turn on your headlights, it will dim all the gauges. This is a really nice feature because these LEDs are very bright. They're designed to be seen in direct sunlight. So, being able to just dim them is fantastic. So that's the tachometer. Let's go to the speedometer next. Okay, here's the speedometer. Again, comes with the instructions, everything you need to know. These speedometers have a ton of information built into them. I'm not going to go over that right now. We'll go over that later once we get this in the Jeep in the next couple weeks or months, whenever it gets done. However, same setup. Power, ground. Sorry. second. So, and again, and this one actually lights up so you can kind of see. Again, this goes back to data resolution. When I was looking for a nice speedometer for this swap, I wanted something low speed. Because I have a diesel that's going to have a max RPM of about 2800 RPM, my top speed is not going to be that great. But it really doesn't matter because it's a TJ Wrangler. You really don't want to be doing, 160 miles per hour. So again, what I like about these is this, and I've run one of these before, this adapts to how fast you're going. So this will tell you your speed in miles per hour. This is your trip. This is your actual odometer. And it has other settings as well, but I don't remember how to get into them. Again, please refer to the instructions. But it's just a very nice, bright digital gauge. Very fast, very accurate. The gauge updates very quickly. And again, it's very easy to read. And like all the other gauges, it has this purple wire for dimming, and it dims the gauge. Again, very nice quality. I'm looking forward to having this in the TJ Wrangler. It should be perfect. And we will go over how to calibrate this once we get the Wrangler up and running again. Let's go on to the next gauge. Okay. So now we're going on to the fuel gauge. Now the fuel, coolant, oil, and volts, these are a brand new style from Intellitronix, and I am very excited about running these. The old gauges I used from them for fuel, volts, oil, and coolant was just a big digital readout. So fuel was actually percentage. It would start at 99% and go all the way down to 0. Volts, it would just read, 12.2. Oil would just be 35 psi. Coolant would just be the actual temperature, so 125. They work great, and for some people that's going to be perfect. I truly love what they did. These are a brand new product. I hadn't seen them before, and I'm really excited to put these in the TJ Wrangler. So let's go ahead and get this out of the box and hooked up. And this is why I love these new gauges. Now let me center this on the camera. They have basically made digital gauges that are still bar graphs. And I absolutely love these. I've never run them. I'm really excited to run these. And I really just like, again, the resolution of data. To me, that is a very big thing when I'm customizing a vehicle or building a Jeep. And I like it how it goes from empty, quarter of a tank, half a tank, 3/4 full. That is probably a 270-degree sweep. And I like it that it also says fuel. I mean, it's very clear, it's very bright. Again, we have the purple wire so we can dim the information. Let me just demonstrate that real quick. So again, we're not going to be blinded at night when we're driving, but during the daytime it's going to be bright enough that we can see. I don't know how well the dimming is going to show up on camera, but I would say by the naked eye it probably reduces the brightness by about 40%. It's really impressive. So let's go on to the next gauge. We're going to do volts next. Okay, here's our volt gauge, and we're going to do something a little bit different with this one. Again, all your mounting hardware, the instructions, bubble wrapped. Again, great quality. So this gauge is unique in the fact that it only has 3 wires: dimmer, power, ground. Out of all of them, this is by far the easiest gauge to wire up into your vehicle. Whoops. Now, as you can see right now, it is very low on 12 volts. Now I can actually adjust the output of my power supply, which I'm going to try to do. So you can see that's the max my power supply will do. So it's close to you know, 14 volts. But see how quick that is updating? I mean, these are quick gauges. And I love the style. It's like a needle gauge, but it's digital. I really am looking forward to running these. So let's go on to the next gauge. Okay, let's get this thing plugged in. Again, I love the startup sweep. Now, as you can see, it goes to 80 psi. And again, very clear, very concise. And I love it that it looks like an analog gauge, but it's just such a beautiful design. So, you know, we have 0, 20, 40, 60, 80 psi. This is perfect. I believe this motor should run when it's cold, probably around 65 psi. And then it's going to go down to about 40. Again, this is one of those gauges that I never really liked in the TJ Wrangler. I never liked that it went low to high and it was only about 160 degree sweep. This is a 270 degree sweep. So without even really looking at the tiny little tick marks here, you can tell that if the gauge is over here, you're below 20 psi and you probably need to check your oil level or see if you have the right weight or if you have a problem with your oil pump. Or maybe you have an oil leak which is reducing your oil pressure. Again, resolution of data. When you're doing an engine swap and it's not a factory vehicle, you can never be wrong by having too much information. So let's now go to the coolant gauge. Okay, here's the coolant gauge. Again, full sweep when it starts. Now this gauge is set up and you have to multiply all the values by 10. So it will start reading at 160 degrees and it goes all the way to 240. This is perfect for my application. I know these Kubota engines like to run cool, they don't run very hot. I want to say the thermostat that's in it right now is 190 degrees. I could be wrong, I probably need to check it. But I will be able to very easily tell, again, am I running really hot? Or is it running really cold and I need to figure out a way to make the engine run a little bit warmer, which I really doubt. But again, cold weather, we might need to look at a different thermostat. But this is a fantastic gauge. Great resolution, same thing as all the others. So this is the final gauge that is going into our instrument cluster. Now I have 3 other gauges I want to show you, so let me put this away and pull out those other gauges. Okay, so now we have the boost gauge. Now this is important because I am running an aftermarket turbo. I'm going to be running a Borg-Warner KO3. Now I believe this gauge, it says 99, I think it will only go up to 30 psi boost, but that might just be what the sending unit can handle. So you'll need to double check if you want to order these gauges. But this is the more traditional Intellitronix gauges that I'm used to. No bar graph, just what it is and the digital readout. And again, it's perfect for a boost application. I really don't want to see a bar graph. I really just want to see the amount of boost the turbo is producing and how much PSI of air the Kubota diesel engine is getting. And again, these update very quickly, bright resolution, has the dimming wire and a signal wire. Great gauge. Now let's go on to the other gauge for the Kubota diesel engine. Okay, so the last gauge I'm going to be showing y'all today is my Pyrometer, or the EGT gauge, exhaust gas temperature. This is going to be the most critical gauge I have in tuning the Kubota V2403. Knowing how hot your exhaust gases are will allow you to properly tune the fuel delivery to your engine and ensure long life of both your turbo and your diesel engine. So let's go ahead and turn this on. So this is the EGT gauge. It's bigger than the rest. All the other gauges are standard 2 1/16 of an inch diameter, and the speedometer and tachometer are also a standard 3 3/8 inch diameter. Now I'm not completely sure on the size of this, but this is like probably slightly smaller than 2.5 inches, but that's fine. I really need this gauge to be clear, and it does come with a Type K sending unit. Now this thing updates in 1 degree increments. And it's really cold in my shop right now, so I'm going to try to hold it, but it does update quickly. And this is just off of my body heat. Again, it's very cold in the shop, but very fast, very clear, very accurate gauge. This is going to be very vital in this diesel swap. And if you're looking to do any kind of diesel swap, I would highly recommend one of these gauges. The other thing I really like about this gauge is, I don't know if you can see it, it has a warning light right here. So I can set it to a temperature limit, and if this reads hotter than that temperature limit, this warning light will go off. This is a great gauge, great design. I'm really looking forward to being able to fine-tune the fuel delivery to my diesel engine to get the best possible performance and life, not only out of the engine, but also out of my turbo as well. Let's go on to the final gauge. Okay, this is the final gauge that I have for this swap, and this is a transmission temperature sensor. Okay, for the final gauge, this is a transmission temperature sensor gauge. If I can get it in there correctly. I've been doing great all day. Now, this is important for several reasons. My Jeep came with a 42 RLE 4-speed automatic. I am not going to be running that automatic transmission. I wish I could, but there's no aftermarket support and no aftermarket TCM or transmission control module that can control that transmission. So I am going to be running an AW4 out of a Cherokee XJ. It's another 4-speed automatic. It's a really good automatic transmission, very simple, cheap to buy. You can get them very reasonably. But because I am putting it in a different application, I am going to be putting a shift kit in it, and I am going to be running an external transmission cooler on it. I really want to be able to keep an eye on the transmission temperature. Now, I want to do that for a couple of reasons. First off, those transmissions are known to run hot anyway. Now, putting the shift kit to reduce friction in it and also running the external transmission cooler, that should really help with the temperature. But further, because we are running a diesel engine, a diesel was never made to factory to that AW4 that I know of. I know the Cherokees did come with a diesel engine, but I can't say for certain what the transmission was for those engines. And because the Kubota engine we're running, we are looking at having around 300 foot-pounds of torque at right around 1600 RPM. That is a lot of torque going through that engine. So being able to keep an eye on the temperature is crucial. And it's also good just because when you're off-roading, you know how hot your equipment is becoming. And with a transmission, especially an automatic transmission, if you can keep the temperature below, I believe it's 210 degrees Fahrenheit, you will make your transmission last way longer. It's very important on an automatic to keep your transmission fluid temperature down. So this is going to help me fine-tune everything. It'll let me know if my external cooler is working. Again, the word I'm going to be using this entire swap is resolution. I just need resolution of data for everything I'm doing on this swap. So getting as much information back to myself is going to be absolutely crucial. And this is just another cheap, inexpensive gauge that is going to help me maintain and monitor everything going on in this Wrangler. Okay guys, that's all I have for today. This was a really quick episode. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.